Plugin Alliance just released the Knif Soma EQ. Now, this is one of the most sought after EQs in the world. So today we're going to take a look at this new EQ and we're going to find out if they were able to capture the magic of the original box inside of this plugin. Let's go. Hello everyone, today we're going to look at the Knif Soma, and this might be the most ambitious plugin that Plugin Alliance and Brainworx has ever released, because this is such a sought after and loved EQ that if they didn't get it quite right, people are going to be all over it. So I'm excited to try this plugin and to try it on some sources so you can hear it firsthand and see what this plugin sounds like. Alright, so this is the Knif Soma EQ, and I think the GUI looks great. A couple things I'll just point out on it is you have your high pass and your low pass filters over here on the right. So if you were trying to find them on the left, they are over here on the right. And if you flick this switch right here, you can see that you can get much more aggressive high-pass filters, but I'm going to leave that on the standard setting. So down here on the bottom left, they do have the TMT built into this plugin, and that's where it gives you just slightly different. If you change the channel, like if I change this channel here, it gives you slightly different analog anomalies because no two analog pieces of analog gear would sound exactly the same. So they replicated that. So if you use this on several different channels in your mix, you can assign them to different channels and they won't sound exactly the same. There'll be slightly different analog anomalies with that TMT. And then you have the mono maker and the stereo width. I personally really like the sound of the stereo width that they add into their plugins. I love the one in the AMEC EQ200. I use it all the time. And I used it on these examples just a little bit too. I usually use between 110 and 115, or if you want to get really adventurous, you can go up to about 120. Last thing I'll point out on this is the input gain. Now this is important to point out because this EQ sounds very different if you drive it versus if you back off on it. So as I was driving this EQ with the input gain, it really changed the coloration. So if you want more coloration out of this plugin, you can use this input gain to drive the source a little more. And to me, it made a huge difference. And I'll show you on each source how much I use the input gain. And then here's your output gain. So if you're going to drive your input gain, you can bring down your output gain right here. Okay, so the first example I want to show you is a future bass pop song. So I want to play you that song, and I'm going to first play it in bypass, and then I'll put in the Knif Soma. Be watching for the blue light here, because when the blue light comes on, that's when the EQ is engaged. So I'm going to show you it with and without, and then I'll show you actually what I did to get the sound that I got. So here's first bypassed.
The moonlight lights up your eyes. It breaks my heart to see you cry. I promise you everything will be alright. The stars are shining bright tonight. It's such a joy to be outside. I promise you everything will be alright.
Okay, so to me, to my ears, it tightened up those lows, made them more powerful, made everything a lot clearer and cleaner, and just gave it a little bit of air. So big difference to my ears. Now it should be noted I did use stereo width, so that obviously is going to help a little bit as long as you use it without using it too much. So let me show you what I did. First thing I did on this particular track was I engaged the high pass filter all the way up to 50 Hertz. And then if you go over to the left here, I set the low frequency to 68 and I boosted at 4 dB. So what that does is, the high pass cut at 50 is going to really tighten up the low, but that boost at 68 really brought back the power. The thing I did in the second band was I cut at 330 hertz, and that's trying to clean up that low mid mud and give more clarity to the overall song. So I cut that at 2 dB at 330 hertz, and I use the 0.7 here on the Q, which is a little broader Q than what I used in the low band. In the third band, I was trying to cut some of that harshness, and I ended up cutting 1 dB at 2.7K to try to take away some of the harshness in the track. And then in the fourth band, I just boosted air. So 18K, I boosted 2 decibels. So again, let me play that again. And now you can just directly, kind of after you know what I did, you can kind of see if you can notice the differences even more. So first bypass.
The moonlight lights up your
In.
to see you cry.
Out.
I promise you everything will be alright.
Out.
The stars are shining bright tonight. It's such a joy to be outside.
So to my ears, that made a huge difference, and I'm really liking the way that it sounds. So the next example I want to show you is actually a cinematic piece that I wrote, so quite a bit different than the first example. And I wrote this in the style of John Williams. So let me first play this with without the EQ, and then I'll pop it in. So here's with no EQ. So here's with EQ. So let me show you what I did, and then I'll play it again and put it in and out of bypass so you can hear it more directly. So on this one, I did the same thing that I did in the first track. I engaged the high-pass filter all the way up to 50 hertz, and then I boosted in this one at 82 hertz, 3 decibels, bringing back that low-end warmth, tightening up those lows. And on this one, I cut low mids at 270 at 2.5 dB. On the third band here, I boosted 1.5 dB at 3K, so kind of the opposite treatment that I did on the other track. The other track, I was using this third band to cut some of that shrillness, but on this track, I was actually wanting more of that frequency to actually make it brighter. And if you look here, I actually set this to a shelf on that third band. So I'm boosting 1.5 dB, everything above 3.3K, 1.5 dB all the way up the spectrum, and I thought that really actually added something nice to this track. And then lastly, I'm boosting the air on this track at 15K at 2 dB. So I didn't do anything with the input gain on this track. I actually tried, and I didn't like the coloration it was adding for this particular track. For this particular track, it sounded good just to leave the input gain at 0. So let me play it again, and I'll take it in and out of bypass. So watch that blue button, because when that's on, the EQ is on. So let's start with bypass, or start in bypass. So there you go. And both of these songs that I played for you, this was just really quick, throwing this EQ on, trying some things, and just going with it. So I probably would come back later if I were really mastering these tracks, probably come back later and tweak them even more. But you can see, just without even spending a lot of time, you can definitely get some good results with this EQ. It's definitely a special plugin. Okay, the last example I have is actually a indie rock track, so different than the other two tracks, and that's really what I wanted to do was give you three very different sources that you could hear this EQ on, so you could hear it at work in a lot of different genres. So I'll do the same thing I did with the other tracks. Let me first play a portion of it bypass, and then I'll put it in. Now with the Soma. All right, so let me show you what I did on this one, and then we'll do side-by-side comparisons again. So again, once again, I set the high-pass filter to 50. Now, you know, always try different things. You know, typically I probably would set it to more 33, but on all these examples, cutting everything out under 50 actually sounded pretty good, and I was able to bring the warmth back using this low band. And so for me on all these tracks, it had the effect of tightening up the lows and actually making them sound more powerful, even though technically I was cutting out everything under 50. So, you know, don't mix with your eyes, don't mix with your brain, mix with your ears. To me, this sounded good. You know, you can't get stuck in this place of thinking, oh man, I'm cutting out everything under 50. That's going to ruin the song. No, just use your ears and let your ears tell you what's actually good and what's not. So on this track, I cut out the high pass filter on 50 again. But you can see over here at 56, I added 4 dB at 56. So that really brought back that warmth in the lows, but it also gave it a much more focused low sound on this track. So the second band, I did again similar treatment to what I did in the other tracks. I cut out at 270, 3 dB on this one. And I used the 0.7 on the Q, which is a little broader. It's not the broadest, but it's the second broadest setting on that Q. On the third band, I added 1 dB at 1.5K, and again, I used that shelf filter. I'm just in a shelfy mood today, and I just like the way that the shelf filter is sounding in this EQ. So just a little bit, 1 dB, but it is boosting every frequency above 1.5K across the spectrum when you use that shelf filter. Lastly, to get some air, I boosted this time air at 12K, and I boosted 2 dB. Again, I'm using the stereo width, this time at 115%. And I did drive the input gain at 1 dB on this track. It didn't sound that future bass track. It just seemed like the more I boosted the input gain, the better it sounded. On these other tracks, they had definitely an area where it was too much of a good thing. But I did think it sounded better at 1 than it did at 0. I got a little more coloration. I thought 2 was too much, but 1 actually was just the right amount of coloration. So again, let me play that track, and I'll take it in and out of bypass. Watch that blue button. So first bypassed. So there you have it. I hope that gave you a better idea of what this EQ sounds like. I have only used it here for about an hour and a half, and so far I'm really impressed. I'm excited to shoot it out against some of my other stereo bus EQs like the AMEC EQ200, which is probably currently my favorite color bus EQ. But this one might be giving it a run for its money. And the one thing I could tell you for sure is this is a different color than the AMEC EQ200. And so this might work on some things that doesn't work on, and obviously vice versa. So if you got some value out of this video, please like this video and also subscribe to this channel. Turn on that bell for notifications so that you'll know when my next videos come out. Also, I recently did a video on what I believe to be the best EQs of all time, and you can watch that video right here. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day. Oh. Okay, let me do it again.